Okay, Staying Fat for Sarah Burns, Chapter 9. I push through the double doors of the Sacred Heart Psych Ward, spotting Sarah Burns in her now familiar position at the end of the couch. The on-duty nurse waves to me as if I worked here. Several patients greet me by name. On my way out, I'm going to ask for a white coat, or at least a stethoscope. How's it going? There will be no response, no head movement, nary a twitch of the eye. I have been better, she says. If my eyes popped as far out of my head as it seems, I'd have to dive to catch them. Don't be a jerk, she says in a whisper, lips glued to her teeth. Jesus, you're talking, you're coming out of it. I was never in it. Keep talking, nurse. Don't you blow it. How's it going? The approaching nurse asks, nodding at me. Same, I say back. Would you like some juice or something? It's snack time. Sure. Great, be right back. She walks around behind the front desk to the kitchen. What the hell? I needed some time off, Sarah Burns says. Yeah, but... Listen, she'll be coming right back. I'm only going to say this once. Don't you go trying to put your head together with Dale Thornton to figure out what happened to me. Dale Thornton already knows, doesn't he? Maybe he does and maybe he doesn't, but you leave it alone. I want to tell her what I know, and I want to know the rest, but I promised. I don't know if I can still kick your ass. You lifting all those weights and swimming like there's gonna be another flood, but I'll sure give it a try. I think a second. I'll make you a deal. This has something to do with how you got up here, right? Her eyes slide sideways. None of your business. Well, I'm making it my business. You probably can still kick my ass, but I've been learning to be more gracious about that over my lifetime. Here's the deal. You tell me why you're here, and you tell me what happened, how you got burned, and I'll keep my mouth shut. I don't have to tell you nothing. And I don't have to keep my mouth shut about whatever I think, or whatever I trick out of Dale Thornton. Sarah Burns stares ahead, stone silent. Look, Sarah Burns, I've proved I'm your friend. I didn't go off after I lost weight and leave you behind. I've been up here every day, even when I thought you didn't understand a word I said. I'm still with you, even though I feel like a fool, knowing you've understood every word I've said over the past few weeks. You're still the person who knows me best, but you coming up here scared me. It's been like you died. This friendship thing goes two ways. You had to know I was dying. That's chicken shit. Sarah Burns waits as the nurse brings my juice and a glass for Sarah Burns. She places a straw in each glass, then wanders back behind the desk. It might be chicken shit, but I haven't been okay. This has kept me alive. Friends aren't the same for me as they are for you, no matter how scared you were or how fat you used to be. What does that mean? Look at my face, you cheeseball! She spits, almost blowing her cover. I've seen your face, I say back, holding my own. What's the difference about it now than ever? Sarah Burns' shoulders slump, and I briefly glimpse deeper into her, past the hard crust, past her inclination to double up her fist at the sound of the very first syllable of the wrong word. Every day I live with it is one more day I've lived with it. I'm a little fuller up. Nothing changes. I have to be tough or funnier every minute. If I let up for just a second, it gets me. It gets me when I'm half awake in the morning and I forget who I am. After all these years, I still dream I'm okay once in a while. In fact, I dream it all the time. She glances sideways again. Look, ask the nurse if we can go for a walk outside. I'm tired of talking like Edgar Bergen. Sarah Burns knows Edgar Bergen from all the old television shows we watch on cable TV. He's like the granddaddy of ventriloquists. I know him because his daughter is Candace Bergen, who I would like to own. I step over to the front desk to make my request. The nurse makes a couple of calls, and before I know it, Sarah Burns and I are in the elevator. Might as well trust a fat kid, she says, when we're definitely out of earshot of the hospital. At least 2 inches of snow covers the ground, and we crunch over the unshoveled walk alone in the freezing afternoon. Frost stands on the bare branches of trees like white icing. I say, "Fat kids give you more to trust." My dad burned me on purpose. What? Spare me the surprise, okay? Okay, Jesus, you mean he poured the spaghetti on you? It's my last lie to Sarah Burns. My last lie to her ever. But I have to make her believe Dale didn't tell me anything. When I saw him in my neighborhood, standing next to his junky car, looking all out of place, and like he knew it, I knew what a risk it was for him to be there. I'd rather have Sarah Burns think I was the liar than Dale. There was no spaghetti. I was only about 3.5, but I remember it like it happened this morning. My mom and dad were fighting real bad, hitting, throwing things. It's the only time I ever remember my mother fighting back. Dad had her by the hair, and he was filling the kitchen sink to put her head in. I was sure he would kill her, that she'd be gone, and then it'd be just him and me. I was so afraid of him. I was watching from this little cave underneath the stairs where they couldn't see me. Then the sink was full. She was screaming, but it didn't sound as much like fear as rage. She kept threatening to kill him. Dad laughed and yelled, "Oh yeah?" over and over. And then he pushed her head down. She kicked and I heard the bubbles. And then I had to try to save her. I ran at him, screaming, and crashed into his legs. It knocked him off a little, and he loosened his grip, and my mother got away. I swung at his legs as hard as I could, over and over, but all of a sudden I was in the air, almost over his head. Mom got a knife out of the drawer and came at him, but he held me in front of him and backed through the open hallway into the living room, laughing. Then he said, "Here's your pretty little baby for you." And I looked up and saw the wood stove coming right at my face. I put my hands out, and my stomach is in knots. I believe I will never unwind. God, I don't want to hear this. I don't remember him actually doing it, she says. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with bandages covering my face and hands, and a nurse there said I had pulled a pot of spaghetti off the stove onto myself. I couldn't talk or even move, but I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But all I did was lie there and drift off. The next thing I knew, Dad was leaning over me. He said Mom was gone and would never be back, and that if I told what happened, he'd burn the rest of me. He said he didn't care what they did to him. I sit on a cold cement bench, staring silently up at Sarah Burns' scarred face. Words would jeopardize the thread of trust, because they would sound fake. They would be fake. There are no words for this. She says, "That's it." I put my hand on the side of her hip as she stands in front of me, and she doesn't knock it away. She stares straight ahead into the trees behind my head, looking so tough and so fragile. "What happened to your mom?" She shrugs. "Gone. I never heard anything from her again. Eric, I swear to God, if you ever tell anyone this, I'll kill you. But I used to sit in my room and look out the window at the stars and the moon and stuff and imagine she was figuring a way to come get me. That one night there'd be a light tap on my window, and I'd just put some clothes in a bag and crawl out onto the limb of the big tree and slide down and be saved. I even thought she'd make me look pretty again. But my dad accomplished what he wanted when he ruined my face. Mom didn't want me anymore. I've thought maybe he killed her, but I guess I don't think so. I don't think she could have just disappeared without somebody checking. He told everyone she left." "Jesus Christ." She nods. "Yep, no shit." We're quiet a second or two. So why did you come to the hospital? I mean, why now? Sarah Burns closes her eyes. Dad was getting crazy again. I started having dreams about the stove. He held my face against it, Eric. He's drinking more now, and he sees and hears things. I got the same feeling I had that day he burned me, and I decided that if I had the feeling, it was probably right. Jesus, Sarah Burns, why didn't you call the cops or something? Her soft edge instantly hardens. What are they going to do? Put him in jail until he dries out? Then what happens? Jesus, Eric, get an idea. You could tell them what really happened. Right. Why would I be telling it now? It's been 14 years. They're sure going to believe me. Besides, just after it happened, some people tried to get the state to believe it couldn't have been from scalding water, but I was afraid to talk, and that ended it. Yeah, but it ended because you didn't tell them. The spell is broken. Sarah Burns' interior is closed for the day, and I'm angry because my need for revenge on her father is what closed it. Look, Eric, she says impatiently, don't ask me a bunch of questions. I told you because you said you'd keep quiet. Don't make me regret it. She looks away. Or you will. I came to the hospital to think. I needed to get away before something really bad happened. I'm old enough to get away now. I've always known I'd have to. It's just hard looking like this. Yeah, listen, Sarah Burns. What do you want me to do? For now, don't tell them I talked, but that you think the walk helped. That you want to do it some more. Then all you have to do is keep your mouth shut. I mean it, Eric. You can't tell your swimming friend or your coach or your mother, nobody. You said you wanted to prove how good a friend you are. This is your chance. You tell nobody. Okay. I know what Sarah Burns is doing. She has to have control because of how big this is. You don't let something this big out unless you have it on a leash. It would eat you alive. It's after midnight. I'm in my room, staring at the ceiling, lost in the 1960s with The Lovin' Spoonful. Do I believe in magic? They want to know. We'll see. I've been thinking about what a huge risk it was for Sarah Burns to tell me her story. Not about the story itself, which is certainly bad enough, but about how scary it must have been to let me see her like that. Scared. Vulnerable. I wanted to get off by myself afterward just to consider things, but I had my date with Jody, and only a natural catastrophe would have kept me from that. This was a strange date. In the beginning, Jody seemed as removed as ever, except she sat on my side of the booth, and her hand touched my leg enough times to kickstart me pretty good. Not that I'm complaining, but the Burger Barn is a local hangout, and Britton's friends could have easily seen us. That is, if they weren't joining hands in a circle at the Church of Jesus Christ of All the Good Guys, praying for me to drop 50 pounds the hard way in a leper colony. But Jody didn't seem to mind whether anyone saw us, and believe me, if she didn't mind, I didn't mind. So I said, after we had ordered, what did you want to talk to me about? She smiled. Get right down to business, huh? I've been real curious all afternoon. I mean, I don't get invited out much. She smiled again. Did you have any guesses? Yeah, I said, running my hand over the back of my neck. I guessed you'd developed a brain tumor. Then I guessed you were writing a research paper on chunko swimmers of the Western Hemisphere. Then I guessed, you've been busy. I have been busy. Then I guessed those weren't good guesses and decided to just come out and ask. Tell me what you think of Lemry's class. I said, I think it's the best class I've ever taken. It makes me think. Sometimes I hate that, but mostly I don't. Why? I'll bet you think I hate it. If I had to bet a month's pay one way or the other, that's the way I'd go. I bet you think Mark Britton and I think exactly alike about everything we've covered so far in that class. Now I smiled. That's crossed my mind. But I'm getting the feeling you're about to tell me how full of shit I am. She smiled back. You're so full of shit. That's what I thought. Exactly how full of shit am I? I had an abortion. Jesus. Surprised? No. Girls are forever asking me out for a burger so they can tell me about their abortions. I paused a minute. Was it Britain's? Yeah, it was Mark's. Does he know? I mean, he knows, right? He knows. God, put that together. Mark Britton. What a hero. Broke major blood vessels in his neck and eyes today in class preaching the evils of fornication, and all the time he's been a fornicating fool. I almost spoke up in class today when he got so excited, but it's not something I want the world to know. I swatted the thought of what all this meant about Jody and Mark out of my head like a mosquito off the back of my neck, because that could make me seriously depressed. Plus, I found myself genuinely curious. What does he say to you? I mean, after an attack of hysteria like he had today, what does he say? He has to know how chicken shit that is. Jody smiled sadly and stared at the table as the waitress placed our burgers and fries in front of us. Sure, she says. But he says he's different. That when you have a mission, you can't let human error stand in your way. You expect people to help you with that. Meaning you? Meaning me. And he says people as committed as he is get special leeway in the Lord's eyes. It was my job to prevent it. God's sliding scale. I bit into my burger. Committed. That's a good word for what he ought to be. Then it occurred to me. Why are you telling me this? I've known all along, in fact, since I had the abortion, that Mark and I weren't going to make it. He's treated me like shit since then. At least when we're alone. One thing about Mark, he forgives himself a lot more easily than he forgives others. He gets forgiven for fornication, but you don't? Something like that, she said. Suddenly tears welled in her eyes. God, I've been so stupid. I didn't want to go to bed with him in the first place. Then I didn't want to have the abortion. Oh, God. And then I got star-eyed and lovey and wanted to get married and have a family with him. I didn't know what to do. I just felt so dirty. I wanted to do something right. I put my hand on hers and felt it tremble. But that threw a crank into his mission. I should have stopped seeing him before the abortion. I really should have. I don't know how I'd have handled it if it hadn't been for Mark, but I'll tell you one thing. What's that? You can't imagine the emptiness. There's a piece that isn't getting talked about in class. Mark took me to the clinic, but he dropped me off 2 blocks away because he thought somebody might recognize him. When I came out, I was just lost. All Mark wanted to talk about was how we'd made the right choice and how his life was no longer ruined. I just wanted to cry and have somebody hold me. This was a very different Jody than I'd imagined. God, nothing is as it appears. I placed my fingers on the cords running the length of her neck and massaged easily. They were strung like the high notes on a grand piano. All I could think was to get away from him, so I went home that night and laid down in my room and cried and hated his guts. And I was going to go to school the next day and tell him to go to hell. That would have been appropriate. Before I got a chance, he got me alone in the breezeway out by the gym and said how sorry he was he hadn't paid better attention to my feelings yesterday. Said he'd been a senseless boob and that he'd make it up to me. I felt so bad about myself, so really desperately bad that I went for it. I just wanted somebody around me who knew, and I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone else. She shook her head. I marched in the picket line with him. I take it you couldn't tell your parents, I said, thinking how Mom is the first person I'd go to in that kind of jam. Jody looked at me as if I'd blown my nose on her burger. They'd die right after they killed me. Enough said. Anyway, I just wanted somebody to like me, and Mark was it. Later, I saw he didn't really like me any better than I did, but I was convinced I'd done something so horrible that nobody would ever like me again. I thought people would be able to look at me and know. She touched the back of my hand. My family goes to the same church Mark does. Ms. Lemry's class is really the first time in my life I've ever heard an adult question anything I grew up believing to be a sin. At least an adult I respected. If my parents knew what goes on in there, they'd jerk me out so fast my seat would ignite. I feel bad about what I said next, because I should have just been thinking of Jody, but I said this for me. I wish you'd have known me then. I don't think there's anything you could have done to make me treat you like Britton. She smiled and said thanks. I knew that, I think. That's why I'm telling you now. I don't want you to do anything about it. I'm not hustling you. You just seem to know about feeling like a piece of shit. She smiled. Feeling like a piece of shit. So I'm lying here, thinking I may have a girlfriend or something. And you know what scares me? It's easy to sit back, like in Lemry's class, and take shots at guys like Britton. But if Jody and I end up being together, I'll have to perform. And to tell you the truth, I've always been a better sniper than a true soldier. In my friendship with Sarah Burns, I've just followed her lead. And up until recently, my friendship with Ellerby has been a couple of guys loaded up on testosterone, yucking it up. When the class is discussing abortion, I can't sit back with no real opinion if I have a girlfriend who's had one. I need to have a serious talk with my mother before it's too late. Chapter 9 Analysis, and wow, that's a big time chapter right there. Two huge things. Thing number one, Sarah Burns started talking, and I was pretty impressed with how Eric handled it. He understood something there. Now for Dale Thornton, the betrayal, the telling of her truth to someone else, that was a hard thing for him, and he felt bad doing it and telling it because he was conflicted about, number one, betraying Sarah Burns and not being a good friend. His definition of being a good friend was maintaining the truth and the secrets. And so he told Eric, but it was hard. So Eric does a really good job of making it so that Dale Thornton doesn't have to worry about those kinds of things, doesn't have to worry about spilling the beans, giving out the secret, whatever, because he's able to get Sarah Burns to tell it herself. And her truth is a really hard truth to hear. Her father was basically trying to kill her mother, and when she tried to help as a 3-year-old, he burned her badly. And this is really just hard to listen to, and it's hard to think about somebody doing that to their own child. That's huge news. And then we shift gears, and I don't know about you, but I kind of needed a breath. I was like, oh gosh, I need to relax here. This is just tough. And the author comes back and punches us in the gut again with this revelation from Jody Mueller that she had sex with Britton, got pregnant, and Britton basically pressured her into having an abortion. And on top of it, she tells the tale. He dropped her off 2 blocks away so he didn't have to be seen or associated with it. He didn't meet up with her afterwards. He just left her on her own. He basically treats her like garbage and says it's her fault that it happened, that he's got bigger goals and God wants him to do certain kinds of things, so that's her fault. And and this swirling of things, I think, is honestly what makes this very realistic. And I don't know about you, but life seems like it works like this. Like you have something stressful and you go through the idea of, boy, it'll be better when this is over. Sometimes it's a test or something like that. But that never is true, because as soon as the test is over, or usually before the test is even taken, something else adds to the mix. Maybe your pet gets sick, or maybe you break your phone, or something happens that takes your level of stress and anxiety and kicks it up a couple more notches, and you just have to handle it. And I think that this is what makes this have a lot of verisimilitude. Remember, that's that lit term we've talked about before. Verisimilitude is believability. There's a lot of believability in this book because it's very realistic. This is how life tends to work, unfortunately. All right, now we get to move on to Chapter 10.